Greetings and welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. I'm Phyllis Hollis, your host. As an extension of my Instagram page, Cerebral Women, this podcast offers insights into the visual art world. I interview artists, mainly artists of color and female artists who will freely articulate what inspires their creativity. In addition, you'll hear interesting perspectives from dedicated art professionals who work with artists and the art institutions that feature them. I'm confident that collectively, these individuals will indeed stimulate your mind as they do our eyes. Please know these interviews are conducted in my Manhattan apartment, so please forgive the background sounds of city life. Welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. This episode features Howardena Pindell. Her profoundly personal and politically charged work delivers a dynamic materiality to the canons of painting, serving as much as a diaristic account of her own biography as a means to interrogate broader issues of social justice. With the practice spanning over 5 decades and encompassing a diverse range of mediums, including painting, collage, drawing, and film, she lends visceral form to a rigorous intellectual inquiry of the given subject. Born in 1943 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Howardena works and lives in New York. She attended Boston University and Yale University. Howardena has exhibited extensively, including selected solo exhibitions touring throughout the United Kingdom and on to the Irish Museum of Modern Art in Dublin, Ireland. Others include the Baltimore Museum of Art in Maryland, the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, Texas, the Shed, New York, Oklahoma Contemporary, Oklahoma City, Spelman College Museum of Fine Arts in Atlanta, Georgia, the Studio Museum in Harlem, to name a few. Selected group exhibitions include the Kitchen in New York, Louisiana Museum of Modern Art in Denmark, Museum of Modern Art, New York, National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., Guggenheim Bilbao in Spain, Centre Pompidou in Paris, Tate Modern London, the Brooklyn Museum in New York, the Broad Museum in Los Angeles, California, Seattle Art Museum, Washington, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles, and the Studio Museum in Harlem, to name a few. Enjoy this episode featuring Howardena Pindell, and please visit cerebralwomen.com for her expanded bio. Howardena, I am excited to feature you on my podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
When did you discover your artistic passion, your interest in the visual arts?
Well, it discovered me. I had a third grade teacher, Mrs. Ozier. I was only 8 years old, and she contacted my parents and said, I'd like to speak with you. Your daughter is very talented. You should start to send her to Saturday classes. I was kind of young for that, but I did it. Saturday classes, meet artists, have her meet male and female artists. And my parents introduced me to both Black as well as white and male as well as female artists. So I was kind of shocked when I found the art world was so segregated. One of the influences that drew me to, in a sense, a love of history, I guess, someone in my parents' group of friends had gone to the Philadelphia Museum. And on view was a Fayum portrait from Roman Egyptian time, 100 to 300 AD. And the way Fayum portraits were done, they were done in encaustic, which is a wax with pigment, and they would paint it when you were young. So the idea was to show you as a vital person, not a dead person. Anyway, so I was very fascinated by that. My parents, of course, rushed me to the museum to see it. And according to the Philadelphia Museum, many, 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 many years later, they said it was only on view for a very short time, which I find amazing. And in 74, I believe it was 74, I, with the group, toured Egypt, and it made a big impression on me. This led in time to being around the museum, curious about other forms of art. That led me to the excellence of Duchamp. They had an excellent Duchamp collection. I also became interested in the Renaissance. As a young artist, I wanted to paint like the Renaissance. and of course failed. By that time, I was given by my parents a paint by numbers kit, and what they bought me was Christ praying at Gethsemane. I did attend Saturday classes. I was the youngest person in the class, and it was at Fleischer Art Memorial. What was interesting was no one would speak to me, and then I realized years later they didn't speak to each other. That's strange. I was also sent to the School Art League. Temple University had at the Elephant Park part of their school a Saturday program for artists. Being an artist felt normal. The the field I felt like was normal for me to be in that field. My parents followed all the advice, and as I mentioned earlier, they introduced me to both black and white artists. But the art world was mainly all white and all male, and I discovered that. I was a little late to coming to it, but after I graduated from Yale, there was an attitude at Yale, for one thing. It wasn't the school per se, it was just in general, the vibe. And then when I got my MFA, it was the Yale University School of Art and Architecture. Racism in general was obvious everywhere, but I ran into a little resistance when I attended Saturday classes as a child. That's true. I don't remember any hostility towards me or anything. Anyhow, some of the local stores, I grew up in Philadelphia, some of the local stores were very prejudiced. But the main store, John Wanamaker's, which was like Macy's, welcomed their clients, or maybe were not as openly abusive as I was in other places. Boston, I went to Boston University for BFA, was the worst. I later heard that the art school had a quota of one black student a year, which is true. That's what I saw in terms of every year was only one. And one parent even tried to pay them off to get rid of me, but they wouldn't do it. In Boston, though, the attitude in general was terrible. They would refuse to serve you at a restaurant. And again, I mentioned earlier, one parent wanted to pay them to get rid of me, and the faculty stood by me except for one, and he lowered my grades.
How do you define your practice?
It's so varied. It's exploratory. It's come curiosity. A lot of the colors are from nature. I like to explore things like I had a sabbatical and I wanted to take a writing course because in general I write sometimes. And I signed up for a class and they told me that no one else signed up or too few. This was at the New School in New York. And they said I could either choose another class or they give me my money. And so there was an astronomy class, which was taught by a young man who actually got his PhD in astronomy from where I've been teaching for 44 years, State University of New York. At Stony Brook, I've just retired in December. My interest in science, I enjoy reading Google on the phone, the images of deep space or close-up particles. Hard to talk about it because I am not a science person. My father was a mathematician, basically, and he would tutor young people trying to get into college, and one of them actually got perfect scores, which is amazing. The first toy I received was a microscope, which I still have, not a doll. I didn't get a doll. And I would look on a glass plate at water, Philadelphia water, and in it were swimming it was a microcosm of swimming elements, and they would swim back and forth, and this was our drinking water. Anyway, so I have a little note down here: experimental and exposure to data. In a way, some of the things I do are kind of strange.
How has your technique developed or changed over the years?
I was a figurative painter. Philadelphia is extremely conservative. I pursued through graduate school figuration, but I started to slip into abstraction, being surrounded by abstract artists, and even a crit I had with Helen Frankenthaler When she came to my studio and saw what I was doing, she said, "Ugh, that was done in the Renaissance," and left. She wouldn't talk to me. Most of the students, male students, were mostly hard-edged because Al Held was there, and it was one of the major ways of working. He was everything had a straight line, it seems. Later, I started making looser brushstrokes. My work became more abstract. I graduated with my MFA and moved to New York, 67. I had a day job, which made it hard to work without natural light. I was working with looser strokes and oddly turned to abstraction, doing loose cityscapes. It was only then after Yale, that I stopped working with oil. I was allergic and my hands would swell up. It could be my being inventive and even my being fascinated by poems as the grid, and also was very fascinated by the grid. One of the students in my class, Nancy Murata, her husband was Japanese and they were both students. She started working with the circle and that really inspired me. And the inspiration touched several venues here. The Kentucky experience, I'll call it. The big red circle. The Japanese flag has a big red circle. We were visiting my mother's mother and her sister in Ohio, in southern Ohio. And my father and he drove me into North Kentucky. And we stopped at a root beer stand. And we were given the same mugs everyone else had, except they had a big red circle on the bottom. The old rage became my issue-related work, I believe. As a child, I was upset by it, but I think I took it out on my work. And also, I constantly used the circle.
What is the role of drawing in your work?
Well, I see drawing as the skeleton for the paint, which is the flesh. Studies as a child drawing in Saturday classes changed to drawing as I evolved into abstraction, drew using templates of circles and ovals. I bought templates at an architecture store in New York called Charette. I don't think they exist anymore. That would have been like 67. Now I draw as first step for the Tesseract series, also for the cut and sewn paintings. I draw shapes for the deep sea painting, referring to live deep sea fish in the ocean by way of books. We have a number of books here in the studio. You would say that drawing is the bones, as I mentioned, of the work. Painting is building the flesh on the bones. I started as a child drawing for years. I guess it was that play by numbers thing. I didn't take a class in painting as a child, just drawing.
Are your life experiences reflected in your work?
Yes and no. Yes, abstraction from my unconscious. Everyone has their own reaction. No one's the same. No one's alike. So they will react to your paint, the color, whatever, different than someone else. No issue-related work dealing with hunger, sati, which is wife burning in India, scapegoating, culty thinking, racism, and living in other countries. I'll get to that in a second. At the moment, I'm in a show at the Asia Society until August, and they chose 3 artists to show work that related to their time abroad in Asian culture. They actually, I don't know how to say this, but I was flabbergasted. Apparently, my piece is what they featured for the show, and they put it on all the subways in New York. And that blew my mind. One of the things I'm interested in is color and culture. And I wanted to try to find a way to research it, but it's very hard because no one has ever done it, or a number of people haven't done it. When I say color, for example, in a Hindu wedding, the bride wears red. In a Christian wedding, the bride wears white. In Hindu culture, I believe, when someone has died, you wear white. You grieve for them in white. I'm very interested in that sort of thing. I've lived abroad in Sweden, India, Japan, and France. I have visited Scandinavia, France, Germany, Japan, Italy, Africa, Ethiopia, South Africa, Brazil, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Egypt, Cuba, and Russia. I do not fly anymore, but I was on some interesting flights.
Are you influenced by other artists?
Well, I'd say influence and also respect other artists. Because I know, especially for the black artists, it's been a hard time. Because within the community itself, there was a lot of hostility towards abstract black artists. Duchamp, as a child, I was fascinated by him. I was a curator at the Modern, so on days when the public was not there, I would go into the galleries and look around. Albers, because I took his color course at Yale and it changed my life completely. The person who taught the course, because he had a fight with them, was a man named Cy Silman. But I took the class with the architects and graphic designers. Someone I highly respect, she just died recently, a Native American artist, Jean Quick to See Smith. I believe she was from New Mexico, and her work reminded me of Picasso's Guernica. When I worked at the Modern, the Guernica was still there, so I got to see it. Then, of course, Tanner, who was attached to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. When I grew up, it was no room. Also, Frida Kahlo, I like her work. It's strange and disturbing in a way. Elizabeth Catlett, I knew her before she died. She was an amazing person. She lived near the World Trade Center. I think she went back and forth because her husband was Mexican. She lived in Mexico, but I think probably after that, what happened at the World Trade Center, she moved to Mexico. Betty Saar, she must be in her 90s now. Edmonia Lewis, a historical figure. I like her sculpture. Chakaya Booker is a very interesting artist. She tried so hard, so young, and she got into one of the top galleries, but they are heartless. I'll just leave it at that. Vivian Brown, she is deceased. She was one of the few people of color living in Soho. And they think her materials made her sick. They're not sure. And then Dinga McCann. Those are the main names that I wrote down.
What do you enjoy most about your practice?
Discovery, new ideas, experimenting, seeing the work grow by experimenting, looking for color in nature. We had a beautiful sunset here the other day. It was incredible. It was like a beautiful, like a peach color, but slightly red with a very beautiful, brilliant blue. So there's a lot, we can find in culture that's quite beautiful. Even like some of the fish, are very beautiful. Just kind of waiting for a surprise to happen, put it that way, which will lead to the discovery. I really look more than I realized to nature for color. And of course, there's one thing, there's something I never was aware of. It's called the Pantone book, and it has all these colors in it in little samples. And for example, if we were working with a painting and I can't figure out what color was next, I try to look at the Pantone book to see if it's close to what I can feel. But I haven't used it for a while. I just love working with color. There's a series we've been working on called the Tesseract series. Tesseract is a fourth dimensional cube, but I've made it fourth dimensional geometry. And so we're also doing an undersea series as well. It's hard to explain, without showing you. But the Tesseract, I think, is my favorite. And it's always a surprise until you finish it. It's usually maybe 9 by 9 feet, and it has different geometric shapes, but we play with it. Sometimes we mix deep sea and Tesseract. I just enjoy discovering. I love books. I have so many books.
When do you know a work is finished?
I feel it intuitively. I can feel when it's finished. Sometimes if I have a problem with that, I turn it to the wall and come back later to see how I respond to it, and if necessarily, continue painting on it. But so far we haven't had to do that process. But that's what I would normally do. I mean, I have a lot of help here, but in terms of knowing when it's over, as yet I have not had to turn the painting to the wall. But that's what I've done in the past, in some form, just to make it so that I'm seeing it for the first time, the second time.
What materials do you use in your work?
Well, I use a whole bunch of stuff. Acrylic, and it's usually sprayed or painted. Gloss, of course, acrylic medium. Golden seems to be the best acrylic. And they also are very good about, if you call them for advice about their materials, they'll send you a little kit, which is sweet, especially for the young people. I loved oil, but I can't use it anymore because it can give everything a sense of physical substance, if that makes sense. Or if you're painting water, it'll look like water. If you're painting cloth, it'll look like cloth. There's something about it that gives a materiality to everything. I mean, there's things that are a nuisance about it, and that some colors dry faster than others, and some crack faster than others. So you basically have to dry thick over thin. You start with the thin layer, and then you work up to the thick layer. But if you reverse it, the paint will crack. I use crochet thread for sewing. We use hole punchers of all different sizes. If we need to use ink, we use a permanent ink. We use number 12 cotton duck. When I was in undergraduate school, we used linen, which is supposed to be pretty expensive, but I didn't know anything about cotton duck. I also use graph paper.
What are the most substantial challenges that you've encountered as an artist?
Well, of course, getting any representation at all. But behind the scenes, I mean, like being kind of put down by the white women's movement. Behind the scenes, a white woman artist at some meetings would say, I did not know I was black.
Do you listen to music while you're working?
Well, not now, because I have a team, and it's inevitable that someone's not going to like it. So some people, have their headphones listening to music. I am usually now listening to Midas Touch, David Pakman, Richard Wright, anti-Trump stuff, podcasts. Gets on people's nerves. I don't have the earpods, but I used to listen to music. And one thing that really bugged me, I had a storage unit in Philadelphia, and someone broke into it and stole all of my LPs.
So share with us, what is your process of choosing various colors?
Nature, the Albers class, intuition. But Albert's class, it has stuck with me so long. We would do all of these little diagrams, and he would take like a gray, and then you change the background, and that turns that gray to another color. That gray can become blue. You can make a red become orange. I mean, in other words, it's the proximity of the color to each other that, makes the color read. It depends, too, on your eyes. Some people may see, like, I have a gray sweater, and some people say, oh no, that's like a green. Color is very important to me. And I mentioned that the vivid sunset, the beautiful sunset, that is in my head this morning, this afternoon. I would say Albers and nature and intuition.
How do you keep learning?
I buy books with all intention to read them, and I don't have time. I read or review the books for images. That means those books are specific to deep sea, and some, I think, have to do with astronomy. I find on Google a lot of science issues to read. The only trouble is, if you don't read them then, they're gone. Again, I'm mainly interested in science issues, although it's way above my pay grade.
Do you feel black art can be defined?
Depends on what time period you're living in. When I first came to New York, the African American community was extremely hostile if you did abstract work. And I remember going to the Studio Museum, their first venue, and the head of it told me to go downtown and show it the white boys. I believe he said the same thing to Bill Williams. So we go downtown, and what we're told is, why would I buy an abstraction by a black person when I can buy a good one from a white person? So we were really caught in the middle. I remembered that years ago when I first got to New York, the African American community was up in arms, anger at black artists during abstraction. I hesitate to find it without putting guardrails and limitations on it. Black historical themes like Jacob Lawrence were accepted, and the Museum of Modern Art owns his series, the Migration series from 1995. He was the first African American artist I believe they acquired. Jack Whitten, current, has a one-person show, The Modern. I think it's on the top floor, as did Jam. The early definition, I feel, was one's need to work with issues related to the black community only. One could be censored by both sides. I was on the buyers committee at MoMA, and out of that, two exhibitions came, the Beard and Hunt exhibition. A brief change and then back to normal, in quotes. Byers, who the committee was named after, was a very wealthy young man who knew nothing about nothing. But they had to have, in their mind, a black head of the committee. And then an African American man, I think his last name was Green, was the actual person who ruled the meetings. And Byers killed himself. I don't know whether he was getting a lot of grief for having his name attached to the committee, or if he was a man that had a lot of problems. But I found that kind of shocking. He was gone.
When do the titles of your work enter the creative process?
I don't remember titling anything in graduate school. Maybe I started showing with the dot pieces. The little ones were just numbered, a title number or whatever. I think when I started showing with Dick Lerner, Lerner Hella Gallery, that's when I started to put titles on my work. Here's another guy. He had a hard time paying his artists because he bought a Ferrari. I was supposed to have a show, and I took him to an attorney. I said, Dick, I can't have the show unless you pay me. And he killed himself. But then when I look at the work as it's finished, I start to sense the title. Or during the work, I sense the title. For example, there's a work here that looks like Tang. There's another painting, which is Portrait of Duchamp, and I think there'll be another painting with it. And then with the Tesseracts, we just number them. So the Tesseract series, that's the most important thing I feel I've been doing, or really the one that I like the most. It takes different forms of geometry, and some people say it's very cosmic looking. Again, it's a big space, big size, and then you have these free forms, geometric forms floating. I like those the best. To me, they're like, require some hard work to look at them.
If you were not a visual artist, what career path would you have chosen?
Civil rights attorney for either the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, the Center for Constitutional Rights, or the Southern Poverty Law Center. That's where I'd be.
What does your workspace look and feel like?
Well, it's enormous. Again, that's because of my dealer. It's 9,000 square feet. I mean, I'd rather that I started off small and worked to big instead of big going to small. Very high ceilings. Probably about 20 windows with gates on them because we're on the first floor. A wood floor, which is nice. Lots of sunlight. And it's a very open space. I always close myself into a corner when I work.
When creating, do you think about who your audience is?
I try not to think about it. Actually, I don't think about it. I'm starting to think about it in terms of Trump with my issue-related work, especially my film Rope, Fire, Water, which is about lynching, and my issue-related work like hunger and so forth. And that work has skeletons, literal plastic skeletons, and big ones in front of it. So I don't have no wish to control what they feel or think, but I think with the issue-related work, I expect it will trigger some feelings. And I mentioned hunger again. Everyone is different. I can't control how they respond to my work.
Do you feel your audience understands your work?
Frankly, I don't understand it myself. But sometimes people do. They generally respond to color. Now with the issue-related work, I use text. I put vinyl type on the canvas, so it's really obvious. And I remember someone criticized me years ago and said, why don't you make something mysterious? We don't need to know this, the story. I'm hoping they are somehow touched by the abstraction, color, etc. Its-related work, like hunger, will touch each person differently. I had that film I mentioned. It was shown in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, and they show it. They had a program, and people could leave their feelings. And of course, mostly black people went to see it, but a few white people did. And one question was, this should never be shown again. And another comment was, this is just black trauma porn. That's what you call it, trauma porn.
What do you feel is the purpose of art?
I think it touches us depending on what kind of work you see or do. But I'm hoping with my work that touches us on a higher plane can really help us with our own journey, our own spiritual growth. It can raise us up from the sorrows and success of the day. It encourages you to think. Even if it's just feeling a color, that means sometimes you might see that color again and you'll make the connection. And hopefully it's a benign one.
Howardena, I'm so grateful that I was able to interview you today so I can feature you. So thank you so much for your time. This is our final question. How do you want your art to impact the way people think?
Yes, I feel that's hard to answer because everyone has their own view of the world and has been praised or heard, whatever circumstances they grew up in. Everyone is different. One could grow up in a palace and still be miserable. Anyway, I would hope that people can relate back to the color, the subject matter, and again, it all depends on their life experience. Hopefully the work will help bring anyone who's in despair, especially using color. That's a hope I have.
Thank you so much. This was lovely.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you for listening to Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. For additional content, please visit cerebralwomen.com and be sure to follow Cerebral Women on Instagram.